launch into. How do you know that you have a child who needs to be screened or evaluated for potential problems? And one of the first ones we run into is sensory integration issues. This can be hard to explain to people, especially if you're trying to, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Our kids who have sensory integration issues are the ones where they're easily overstimulated. Sirens, noises, loud noises, radios, bright lights are usually problems for these kiddos. They usually have intolerances to certain textures, and that's textures in clothes, textures in objects, and textures in foods. Some kids that won't eat mashed potatoes, pudding, stuff like that. That's a sensory integration issue where they just can't tolerate that particular texture. There's another little mind thing that was out. It was a really good depiction of sensory integration. If you or I have a tag in our shirt and it's back there, we know it's back there, and we may think about it from time to time, but if we're concentrating on what we're doing, we forget that tag's back there. For our kids who have sensory integration issues, it feels like a cactus. They can't concentrate. All they feel is that tag. These are the kiddos that when you go to put their socks on, you have to put their socks on 15 times because you didn't get the freaking line straight that goes across the toe. And they can't even put their shoe on because that sock's not on there right. And it's not them being picky, it's they can't. Their system is screaming, this isn't right.
Or the sock is too thick, or has bumps on the bottom of it.
My 7-year-old, and I'm not kidding, every single morning, my mom has called me multiple times. He will scream, and I feel so bad for him because there's like nothing we can do about it. Like, it's his brain, his body. And I'm not wearing these clothes. I can't wear these clothes. They hurt these socks hurt my feet. I used to do. My mom will tell you, even to this day, I hate socks. When I was a little girl, socks hurt my feet. With shoes with the socks, and I would flip out over it.
And this is one of those things. Remember back to that picture we drew of our circles, right? For these kiddos, we could insist that they wear, eat, whatever. This is one of those things that we just, it's not worth the fight, right? Because we're looking at, for them, what feels good to them. If they like silky stuff, if they want to wear those athletic shorts every single day, so what that they never wear a pair of jeans? You know, if they like a certain kind of shoe, you know, sweatpants, whatever. This area has gotten enough attention that now we have no-fly underwear, because that was a problem for some of our boys. I mean, they couldn't concentrate in school because the fly was hitting them just right.
Oh boy.
There was nothing.
I do have a question now.
Sure.
Has there been any research on, for instance, babies that are exposed to opioids or cocaine or stimulants, what different sensory integration issues they may have?
Most of the time, the first thing that we always go to is sounds and lights. And that's why in those NICU nurseries, the lights are down low. We're not putting, see, people would always put those mobiles over beds with the turning things that play music. Nah, not for those kiddos, because it overstimulates them and it's just too loud for them. So we look at those kind of things. Flashing lights, bright lights, noises, they tend to get really overstimulated quickly and sends them over the edge. We also noticed with them a particular issue with rocking. Like for our kids that are exposed, and how sometimes we carry a baby in the crook of our arm and we go back and forth like this. That back and forth like this for that kiddo sends them over the top. They're rocking up and down like this for some reason, with the way that the motion and the equilibrium goes, works better this way than this way.
So, but like in terms of babies that are stimulant exposed versus opioid exposed, there's no certain...
Right now where we're at with research is that there isn't. They're doing research and they're doing monitoring, but in order for research to be considered credible, it has to be followed for a certain period of time. And so right now, what we see, Indiana Department of Health has started a program a couple of years ago, taking pilot hospitals and looking at how do we identify moms who might be using and children who might be exposed and get them help while they're still pregnant. And then what happens with the babies that are after they're born. And so we had 4 hospitals, and now we have 27 hospitals trying to get some standardization done, trying to get moms into services, and we're doing cord testing on those kiddos. So what we find is, once those kids, and we get a positive cord test doesn't necessarily mean that a child's going to have neonatal abstinence syndrome. It means that they don't have to be withdrawn from drugs. They might be exposed, but they might not need chemicals to help bring them down. So, chemicals, that's such a nasty word. They might not need medications to transition them off. And if they don't, then they're not going to meet that cutoff line. So what we've seen anecdotally is once we get the baby stabilized and they're detoxed, and we get them on food that they can tolerate, their systems start being able to bounce back, they appear to be pretty typical with no predicted long-term effects. But that's because we've not followed those babies from birth through school. So we can't make the same claims about the effects on these children long term as we can with alcohol, because with alcohol there's 40 years of research to document it. With opiates, there's not. So we say they need monitoring, frequent and routine developmental checks and screens. And what we anecdotally anticipate is problems with comprehension, problems with learning, hyperactivity, and some issues with executive functioning. But we can't back that up yet.
I have a question, because I see a lot of these in 2 of my sons, but with my second son, I was literally stone cold sober. Did absolutely nothing, and he has some of the same issues. But like I said, as he's gotten older, he's learned how to control some, and like you said, like Regine, that child for the life of me, he might, but he complains all the time. And he brings a backup pair, and he likes his sweatpants, pajama pants especially, like fuzzy one, and the silky Nike shorts. If we go somewhere and he's got to dress a certain way, he will accommodate it because he knows that's what he needs to do and be right. But he will have those shorts or a pair of his pants. And the moment he's done with whatever, whether it's pictures or going to a function or something, he will immediately change. And we've bought him different stretchy jeans. These jeans won't do it, but
It's okay to me.
like with my son at 7, I didn't do anything with him. Well, I was taking, but I was prescribed pain pills at the time, and I immediately stopped taking them. And he's got,
Once you find out you're pregnant.
yes, and he's got all these issues. And then my 5th son, I took pain pills the whole time. I was prescribed them. I was in a car accident, bad spinal injury. I crushed my spine and got rods and screws, and I didn't abuse them. I maintained the whole time.
Correct.
And I haven't seen, he's just like my other 3 boys, what people would consider even normal acting boys, but it is amazing because one I did nothing, the other one I did, and then my 5th son, I took him the whole time. And like when he was born, he had meconium delivery, but they said that was because of the stress of the labor. But other than that, he had no withdrawal symptoms. He sneezed once, and that was it. And they was like, well, it's not withdrawal. Like, he didn't have any of that. And to this day, he seems perfectly fine.
And that may be, I think some of that, we want to be careful to not draw hard and fast lines that say this equals this, or this many times equals that. Yeah, it can very well be that there may be things that pop up later that you're not seeing right now.
Yeah.
So, things to just kind of keep in mind along that way. We talked about motor planning earlier, and being able to think about what am I supposed to do with this instruction that I get. If you have a child who appears to have difficulty listening or following directions, are they really processing the auditory part? Are they really processing? Do they get what you're meaning as we go through? If you have a child who has difficulty in self-regulation, and by that we're talking about, can they grade their reaction to the situation? If they forget their pencil, are they able to say, okay, I forgot my pencil, I really like that pencil, but I can use this pencil, it's okay? Or is that going to cause a meltdown, the same as it would if you slam their toe in the door? Kids who have ADHD is one of those things that can be genuinely chemical. It can represent reactive attachment disorder. It can be exposure to trauma, substances. It can be child is overwhelmed. And so, unfortunately, mainstream society jumps in on ADHD and starts giving medication right away. Because we talked earlier during break about being an instant society where we're wanting results instantly. We're a microwave society, so we're going to have kids, ADHD, needs to settle down in school, we're going to give them medication, we're going to solve our problems, and everybody's happy and goes on. And for kids who really need it, they should have it. Because it's like a diabetic. If a diabetic needs insulin, they need insulin. We want them to have insulin. But we just want to make sure that when we're looking at ADHD, is it ADHD or is it representing a problem that we're never going to get to if all we do is medication? Some kids have odd eating behaviors. By that, I mean they may eat only certain types of foods, crunchy foods. Some kids are addicted to carbohydrates and all they want is bready stuff and maybe something with sugar. I've got a son that he cycles through foods. Like maybe he likes hot dogs and all he wants to eat is hot dogs, won't eat anything else. So you're buying hot dogs and just as soon as he started liking hot dogs, he won't even touch hot dogs anymore. Now it's blueberries. And it shifts and it doesn't seem to be connected to any particular thing, but odd eating things. If you have a child who has a disconnect between actions and consequences, take note, because there's a difference between a child who really wants something and is going to do whatever they can to get it because they want it, and a child who doesn't understand and connect that when I touch this or when I do this, this is going to happen. And they'll continue to do it over and over and over. And as adults, you get frustrated because you're like, but they've not made that connection. And so they're going to continue to do that.
Before you go to the next slide,
Sure.
On the odd eating behaviors, I'm trying to get a handle on, because I know a whole lot of folks, kids and adults that have odd eating. What does that mean in terms of a symptom? What?
It may mean that there's an underlying problem with sensory integration issues. It may mean maybe a problem with textures, and maybe a problem with their body, the way that it processes food. If their body may not be able to, they may have certain cravings as a result of exposure that they wouldn't have elsewise. Is that making any more sense or still cloudy?
Yeah, I'm still.
So instead of being like bananas and hot sauce,
Okay.
something like that. But I would think like paint chips.
Okay,
or,
now I get.
Or like pica, right?
Yeah, I understand those pica and those kind of things, but you were giving examples of hot dogs and blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's sort of normal kid behavior. They want this, they want that, they try this.
But only that? So when I'm talking about eating hot dogs, I'm talking about that is the only thing the child eats. It's not going to eat a piece of cheese with his blueberries. It's going to be blueberries. And that's, I mean, kids have likes and
So it's sort of
preferences.
extreme around.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So can these odd eating behaviors turn into an addiction, a habitual? And the reason I say that is my youngest daughter, that's a twin, she's 23, still at home with mom. We used to call her McNoodle because all she would eat was noodles. And then now, from a little age, Now she is a compulsive eater. She's working on it and getting ready to go have that gastric bypass and all that, but she had to change the behaviors first of eating. And it's been 6 months, but she's getting ready to go have it. And it just made me think that odd eating behavior started, but it was not addressed. And it's turned into like an addiction itself. So, yeah, it was just
Or a diseating order too.
Yeah.
So, see, if that were the only thing that were going on, if I had a child, and the only thing that was going on was they had odd eating behaviors, I probably wouldn't be too flipped out. But in the context of everything that goes on with the child, this might be something that you would see, and if you saw it with other symptoms, it would definitely be something you'd say, let's keep an eye on this and let's get it checked out. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember that symptoms present differently at different ages. So, for us, who have adopted children who have experienced trauma and abuse and neglect, some have been fortunate enough. I've had a couple that I have gotten 3 weeks of age. So the general rule goes, oh, you got them 3 weeks, oh, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that you don't love genetics out of them. You're not replacing that, or the trauma that associated with that. But the child that you see, cute little baby and toddler at 2, is not going to be the same child at 4 who has a problem. Some problems are not going to show. Processing problems and comprehension problems and executive functioning problems aren't going to show up in the child's 4. If you have a child who's still starting to see some of those issues with them, you're probably going to they're just 4. It's normal at this point for them to trip and fall. It's normal at this point for them to have problems with this. It's normal, and so they're not going to be flipped out at age 4 over some of the things that you see. What this looks like in a child who's 8 is different than what it looked like in a child at 4. And those cute little babies that we brought home from the hospital, when they are 16 and we want to smack ourselves because what the heck were we smoking when we did it,
Right.
when we adopted them, are totally different kids. So we can't expect to see it manifest itself the same way across the lifespan of a child. It's gonna look differently, which is why I told Deb that what she sees now may be not what she sees 3, 4, 5 years from now. So all she needs to do is just keep an eye and make sure that she's watching for things that cause her concerns or something that changes that's different than what she's currently seeing. Okay, so why is it so important to start treating symptoms early? Now let's take this example. If we have a child who is hyperactive and we're not starting to put interventions into place with this child who's hyperactive, when they get into the school setting, they're going to have a learning disability. Because they're not going to be able to sit, and they're not going to be able to do things in the prescribed way that they're expected to do. Once a child develops a learning disability, then they know they're different than their peers. They're bristling because people are asking them to do something that is outside their ability to do. They're uncomfortable with it, and then we see the acting out. And we can, as caregivers, try to nip this as early in the bud as possible. We may not be able to get rid of the hyperactivity, but we may be able to keep it from going on into the next stages. And of course, from the behavior disability, we'll talk about stacking behaviors later, it only gets more challenging, which is in the next slide. So we have kids who then have learning disabilities. Then the next thing is they have problems with the education system. Then they feel out of tune with their peers. by now we've got all those wonderful little children in our school systems that are calling our kids losers and making fun of them and all the kinds of stuff that happens because they're different than everybody else. So they have
Reminds me of Don.
have behavior issues. You know, that didn't happen with your kids when they were in school? Okay. My kids, what happened with one of my twins, he was in the first grade, and it only took him to the first grade to come home. And one day, he was just eating dinner, just out of the blue, which is typical him, looked at me and he goes, "Why am I such a loser?" What are you talking about? They don't need us to tell them. Their peers tell them. And if we're not careful, our teachers tell them.
Yeah.
Teachers aren't telling them that you're a loser, but by the way that our teachers are expecting them to do things that they're not quite ready to do or not ready to do in that format, they pick up very quickly, there's something wrong with me. I don't measure up. So once we have behavioral disorders, then we get emotional disorders because they start feeling badly about themselves and the world around them, which challenges their social interactions with people. They are isolated and eventually ends up in legal issues.
No, just thinking about Kimberly's question earlier, I mean, that in any other scenario would be a recipe for addictive behavior, particularly if you're already predisposed, right? I don't feel good about myself. People don't like me. I want to feel better. I want to escape. I'm going to eat or drink or use to feel better. So for me, that's kind of where I see the connection.
The self-medication.
Yeah.
She had several of the other symptoms, but also in what you were just saying, it made me think of at one point in time, she had to play the caregiver role because there was nobody else there. She took care of mom. Well, mom got drunk, you know, once she got over. When I got clean though, and this blew me away. She started working, she went to work. I would take her to the bus stop every morning at 5 o'clock. Come home one day and she was crying and she said, "Mom, I can't do it anymore." I said, "What?" And I'm just going on about, you know, starting dinner, and she says, "I stepped out in front of traffic and got pissed off because they didn't hit me." She lost her self-worth because mom's better, mom's going to school, mom's doing her, mom's better. So she didn't feel as though she played a role any longer because she didn't have to take care of mom. She tried to end her life. And it was just like, wow, damn. I mean, she didn't come to that conclusion. Me and somebody else was talking, and then I took it to her, and that was, because she wasn't playing that caregiver role. And it was like, damn.
Codependency is a big part of the relationships surrounding addiction and substances, and between adults, but then also between children and adults and their relationships, where the adults and children have sometimes enmeshment where they feel responsible emotionally for their parent, and then when we change the rules of how things work.
And
Where do we go from here? Okay. All right. So let's look at this from remembering some of the stuff from our brain. If we have a child and the behavior is hyperactivity, the spot in the brain that we're looking at being challenged is in the motor cortex, and what's happening there is there's low serotonin levels. And when there's the problem with that is that there's too much movement interferes with attention and focus. Okay. So they're not able to hang on to things, they can't sit still, they've got to be in motion, and this prevents them from being able to focus and pay attention. Poor attention is in the small frontal lobes. Again, we're talking about low serotonin, and if you're going to ask me what the difference is between low serotonin and high serotonin and so forth, I'm going to tell you that I am not the brain doctor. I am just taking what the brain doctor has said and put these on the slide for us to have this reference. I can go so far with you, but there's a limit to my ability to take it much beyond that. Means that they have difficulty concentrating and attending to everything. Frequently, when we talk about kids who have hyperactivity and poor attention, we say they don't pay attention. And really the reverse is true. It's not that they don't pay attention, it's they pay attention to everything and they can't filter out what's important to them. They're constantly bombarded by stimuluses. The air conditioners, the lights, when I walked on the floor, it creates you shuffling papers, pen clicking. They hear all of that. And it just bombards them and they're not able to separate out extraneous noise from what I really need to listen to pay attention. We have kids who have literal thinking and poor social skills. Here we're going back to the corpus callosum. It's either malformed or it's missing. They have difficulty making connections and they miss social cues. So these are the kids that don't recognize facial expressions. The mom look that you give them, which typically means be quiet because I'm on the phone or I'm in a meeting there. What's the matter? You got something in your eye? They don't get that. They don't understand physical space. We call that hula hoop space. And I'm bad when I'm training, getting on the back or standing next to people is tell them to warn that. But these are the kiddos who are going to get right up in your face. And not a problem thinking that they should maintain proper space or distance before they get right up in there. If you have kids who are impulsive or have problems shifting down from being in a really an activity that requires high activity levels to bringing it down to being able to set or being able to do more of a sedentary thing, means that their brainstem back here is overpowering their frontal lobes and they have difficulty controlling their impulses as a result of that problem.
Sounds like an addiction.
So going back to your brain scans, for lack of a better term, this is where they're able to potentially, I guess, look at different sites in the brain, see what's going on, is it malformed,
Right.
is there a serotonin issue, and then potentially connect that to a behavioral issue or underlying problem.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's the science to that. Now, the brain mapping is a relatively new discipline, and if you're talking to a pediatrician or a doctor down at Riley, they do not give a lot of credence to the brain mapping. Okay? Now, what we find helpful in parents is even seeing it, like we're dealing with it on a daily basis, so we know it's real, but somewhere in our minds, we're still having problems with what's real and what's behavior. So when we look at these brain scans and we can see this area of their brain is blue, that's kind of a help for us because it's like, okay, no, he's not jacking me around. He really can't. And it gives us what we need when we talk to the school systems and providers and other people to say, look at this scan. This particular area of their brain has been affected and helps everybody adjust their expectations. So whether the doctors agree with the science behind it or not, it's still a very helpful tool.
So asking the leading question then, who gives the order to have the brain scan done though? Is that the pediatrician or the doctor, or are there other avenues?
You don't need a
Okay.
doctor to make a referral for a brain
That's what I was
scan.
looking for. Thank you.
Now, Medicaid has paid for some brain scans, but that's dicey on whether Medicaid's going to pay for it or not. Most of the brain scan work, there's a doctor down here in Annapolis, and her name is Dr. Jane Yip, and she does the brain scans, and they're about $200 if you have to pay for them out of pocket. Now, $200 I know sounds like a whole lot of money, but $200 in terms of this report and those scans is not a lot in terms of medical services and where you can take it and go from there. So even if insurance, regular traditional insurance will not pay for brain mapping, but Medicaid has paid for it when it has been written in such a way that looks like it's a diagnosing tool to eliminate certain behaviors or conditions.
Thank you.
So, perseveratation. I hate that word because it's. I always think when I get ready to say it, am I going to say it or am I going to stumble? Perseveration is that being in a rut. This is the kid who is saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And you're like, "No, or the kid that wants to go do something and that's all they can think about. You know, it's like, you know, can I have my iPad now? Can I have my iPad now? Can I have my iPad now? If you just picture that rut that they can't seem to get out of, that's deprivation. It's frequently accompanied by difficulty in transitioning, which means that once they are playing their video game or watching their favorite TV show and it's time to take their bath, they don't transition easily. It's usually a meltdown or a fit or an end-of-life crisis if they have to quit doing that particular activity to move on. And what's happening, the parts of the brain there that are affected is that amygdala, which is part of the emotion, handles all the emotions, has low serotonin, and the problem is that they have trouble shifting gears. Okay, the next one has some fun words in it too. If you have a child who has issues with poor memory, or confabulation. And confabulation is the process when you ask a child an answer to something and their brain picks bits and pieces of what is in their head to formulate their answer. Okay? And I'll demonstrate this. And if you ask a child, frequently the world looks at it as lying. Did you do this? No, I didn't do this. Blah, blah, what happened? Blah, 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 blah happened. And they have this long story of bits and pieces that don't make much sense. So the world and the adults look at this child as in the child is lying. But for the child who doesn't remember or has issues with memory, they realize that we're expecting a response from them and they're pulling bits and pieces of what they have together to give you a story because it's expected of them. And the difference between a lie and confabulation is, in confabulation, they're just trying to answer your question. But a lie is when they're telling you something to avoid a consequence.
I'm glad you explained that because I thought it was the same thing.
So we're kind of setting them up to fail.
We are setting them up to fail. And the one thing, when we talk about interventions, and we'll stop just here for a second, is I always do this call this the reptile pose, the reptile brain. Here is your prefrontal cortex and the midsection of your brain, and here's the brainstem. For our kids who have problems with memory and dysregulation and emotional stuff, they're living down here in their brainstem. And that's where their responses, they're responding to situations. This is where their survival is. Okay? So our kids live in survival mode. And they don't differentiate between a want and a need. If they've determined that they want something, to them, that's a need. So they use every resource available to them to be able to get what that want is. Whole hog. There it is. When we approach children who have problems with memory, confabulation, emotional regulation, down here in the brainstem is where flight, fright, and freeze live. And we know what that looks like when people are challenged. Unfortunately, as adults, we send our kids there. For instance, when we walk into a room and there were Oreo cookies on the table that we left, and we were telling them they can't have a cookie until after supper, we leave the room, which we should never leave them with cookies on the table if we don't want them to eat them. But if we have, we come back and the cookies are gone, and we know they ate them because they have the crumbs and it's on their hands and they're the only ones home, and for all the other reasons we know it was them. If we look at them and go, did you eat those cookies? We've sent them down into flight, fright, and freeze. We put them where they feel like that they're having to defend themselves. So, too often we do this with our kiddos, and it's best not to ask that particular question. We operate off of the assumption that they ate the cookie. If there's going to be a consequence for eating the cookies, we just let them know, wow, I see that, you couldn't wait till supper time to have your cookies, so when we have our cookies today, you won't be getting your cookies because you already had them. And we just proceed with the consequence without making a big, huge deal about it. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick stop here and pause because we're going to be starting to talk about interventions and what we can do. And it's important for us to realize that we're not going to fix kids. That happens to be the mindset of most America. They have that behavior, we don't like this behavior, we want it to stop, we want to fix these kids. And so when we feel like we want to fix these kids, then we're going back to that circle that we have where we're going to exert whatever force, whatever energy we have to be able to control them to do what we want them to do. And it sets us and it sets them up for failure. If we want to help these kids learn to adapt, we have to first learn to accept them for who they are, where they are, and take a breath to look beyond the behavior that we don't like to what's driving that behavior, what's behind it, and how can we meet that need. And the approach is going to be completely different. Makes sense? Okay. So if we have a kiddo who is hyperactive, some of the interventions that we can do with these kiddos are making sure that they get plenty of exercise breaks throughout their day, that they're drinking plenty of water, and that's not pop, and that's not sports drinks. Sports drinks have a high amount of sugar in them too. The other issue with sports drinks, according to the doctors, it does have electrolytes in it, and unless you're going to be doing heavy exercise for more than an hour that are going to affect your electrolytes, when we're infusing those, we're knocking them off balance also. So water is always the best thing. Water helps flush the brain of excess chemicals that they're having due to their fits and their emotional responses to things. We want to make sure that besides the exercise breaks, that they're getting an opportunity to exercise on a daily basis with some big motor activities, running, swinging, playing. For kids, a lot of times that they can work with heavy objects, moving wood from one side to the other, help carrying stuff, that pressure into their body and that movement, that resistance helps keep them in a better spot to be able to deal with the hyperactivity. We want to be in short, concrete sentences with them. They're not going to hear the explanation of why you want them to do that and why it's important for them and what it's going to mean to their future and everything else. Get to the point with these kiddos of what you want them to do and frame it to the positive. Tell them what you want them to do. Look at this because it gives them direction rather than pay attention, which seems so nebulous. Attention to what? What are you talking about? And I think you probably heard before, rather than tell a child, don't run, please walk. Please use your inside voice instead of don't yell. Flip it all to the positive while you're giving the instruction of what you expect them to do instead of what you don't expect them to do. If we make eye contact with these kiddos before we start talking, you don't walk up behind somebody who has hyperactivity and just start talking and expect them to get it. Because for a while, they're not even sure if you're talking to them. You could be the only two people in the room, but they may question whether you're even talking to them or not. So make sure that you make eye contact with them, you're talking to them. Weighted vest, we can work with our kids in our school systems where a weighted vest will help with them. And medication is usually a therapy. I'm not anti-medication, I'm just saying that medications are a quick fix, and if we're not doing interventions, it's not going to resolve anything long term. And they're still doing studies on what the long-term effects are on adults who have taken ADHD medications in children, because we're finding that that's having some effect on their brain also. Okay. For kids who have poor attention span, We want to use words in the child's word base. Make sure you're not talking over their head. Make sure you're using words that they recognize and that they can put into context. Ask some questions after you give them directions. What did I ask you to do? What are you going to do next? What did you hear me say? Daily exercise and movement are good for these kids. Again, drinking plenty of water. There's an exercise that we do with our kiddos that works pretty well, getting them to be able to pay attention. It's called the flashlight game. And we'll use my remote for this time, just as an example. But if I sit down and I said, let's play the flashlight game. I'm going to talk, and as long as I have the flashlight, I get to talk, and you get to listen. You don't get to interrupt. You need to wait till I'm finished, and then I'll pass the flashlight to you. You'll talk, and I will listen, and you do this with your kids just periodically and kind of make a game out of it. Helps lengthen the amount of time that they can pay attention and teaches them how to not interrupt and how to wait till the end.
So when you say a flashlight, does that mean you should have the light on then?
Well, it would depend on your kiddo. If my kiddos had a flashlight that was on, they'd be doing this. They'd be drawing circles
So
on the ceiling,
it
putting it in
doesn't
their
have to be a
nose.
flashlight, it could be any kind of
Yes, sir.
object.
It could be. You could pass the coffee cup. or-
Teachers did that in school, like even in high school. Like you were allowed to talk, let's hold the special pen.
Yeah.
The talking stick.
Yeah.
It can be lots of things, but yeah, the talking stick is a great example of that. If we take, besides using the child's word base, if we take what we want them to understand and we apply it to a child's interest, if they're really, really big into Thomas the Tank Engine, and we're trying to explain something to them, if we can put our instructions using Thomas and what that would look like in a story about Thomas, it's going to click in their brain better. We want to limit information we give them at the time, and the worksheets with short sentences. If you've seen worksheets that the kids bring home from school, piece of regular sized paper, I mean, these slides right here would drive anybody with poor attention crazy, because they don't know what they're supposed to look at. Are they looking at the color? Are they looking at the size of the blocks? Are they looking at the size of the words? I mean, what are we supposed to focus on? So we find with these kiddos, if we put just on the page what they want them to do, then it works out better for them. Some teachers get it and will help you with that, others won't. And when you can't get the help that you need, the easy fix is taking pieces of paper and covering to only show what you want them to see at a time, and then moving as they complete that. Weighted vest works good for that, as well as medication has been used in the therapy. So we good so far? I know this is the part of the day where everybody's going, I'm tired, I'm sitting here, I'm eating.
2 o'clock feeling.
Okay. For our kids who have difficulties with literal thinking, these are our black and white anchors. Limit the use of idioms. Things like light a fire under it. Don't use that with your kiddos, because they're going to be looking for the matches. If you say, when I was growing up, if my parents would say, put a sock in it meant be quiet. Our kiddos who have problems with literal thinking are wondering what sock and where do I put it, and you might not like where they try. So be specific with your literal thinkers. Try to think in terms of black and white with them, and help them by creating a book either on paper or construction paper of book of phrases, where you're exposing them to what idioms are that they can keep with them. They can do it in the car. It can be just something that you kind of work into an activity with them, so that they learn that if they hear that someplace else, this might be what the person is talking about. For kiddos who have poor social skills, if you role play with them a situation, then it helps them see what they might encounter and what their possible responses could be. And you practice scenarios. Okay, you're going to go to Johnny's house. You're going to be on the trampoline. You know, talk about going first, talk about waiting and not getting on the trampoline before they go to. This is a really good one when we're talking about safety skills with kiddos, not talking to strangers. You know, you're going to be out in the park and somebody's going to come up and they're going to, you know, talk to you or ask you your name. What do you say to them? The best thing that helps with these kiddos with poor social skills is peer support. And that's finding a typical peer that functions very well, who is non-judgmental, who will kind of take your kiddo underneath their wing and help them weave through some of the challenging situations in school. Befriend them without making fun of them or making them feel odd. I don't know how to word that politely. But peer support is really good with those. And we explain to our kiddos what others might be thinking or feeling. For kids who lack apathy skills, and those are those kids who have trust issues, they have no capacity to think or feel what others might be feeling. They don't have sympathy. And this is a problem for them in their social relationship.
So you ever watch The Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
Like Sheldon?
Yes.
Sheldon is?
Yeah.
I have a nephew who's on the spectrum, and he just reminds me so much of that. Like, it's just who he is. Like the idioms and stuff like that. He's a very literal kid.
Oh, very.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. And I think that at the time that the Big Bang came out, I don't think it was intended to make social statements about autism, but it has done a lot for people to understand how someone with autism might think
Yeah.
and how they might function.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sheldon's like, what? You know, and what's your issue? And so I think that helps us understand that
Social skills and stuff.
the person's not being malicious.
You just don't get it.
They just don't get it. For kids who have impulsivity and problems with downshifting, this is common with our kiddos, especially the impulsivity part of it, is they're not stopping to think what the consequence is going to be. They're not thinking any further out than the end of their nose. And what helps them is routines, of keeping on track. We can do picture routines for those kids who can't read. We can put it on their desk, we can put it on the refrigerator if we expect them in the morning to get up, make their bed, brush their teeth. Just those snippets all the way through. Those routines help these kiddos adjust better. It's not flawless, but it's a tool that we can use. We practice with them, control games like with the flashlights that we can do. An acronym that we've used with our kiddos, teach safe, and that means stay away from emergencies. When they get to a situation, what's happening? What can I do? What would be safe? And then do it. In our house, it's stop, think, and choose. And it applies to just about everything. It's one way of helping them rein in that impulsivity. It's not 100% effective all the time, but it's a tool. All these are just tools that might work for your kiddo from time to time. Role playing with them is another thing that we can do to help them. The role playing we talk about a couple of times. We underestimate the value of role playing, because another side benefit of being able to role play with the kids is their interaction with us. We're connecting with them where they are and spending time with them. We can't, that's priceless. And that's what these kiddos need, is for us to be able to connect with them where they are and help them go to the next level. It's kind of awkward. I think adults feel awkward about role playing, but it's really an effective tool with our kiddos. And we prevent the fight freeze with them by trying as many situations to plan ahead, not leaving the cookies on the table, not putting them in situations where they might be at risk for that, and not asking them those what, why, who questions that send them in there.
So for this kind of role playing, like what kind of scenario would you suggest? Like is this scenarios regarding emergencies or just like everyday scenarios?
I think it depends on your child and what you're seeing the most problems with, but I think everyday scenarios is more effective because that's what you're going to be running into. Of course, we're going to have emergencies from time to time, but I think it's a lot more probable that we're going to have problems with everyday things. Like if we know that every time the kiddo goes to the grocery store, they, and I hate stores who put all the candy right there by the checkout, and you have to stand there for 15 minutes before you go through. It's like, curse on you! But practicing with them, going into a store, not buying anything, and then walking by. And then just making it longer to where we're going to stand here, get anything today, and just those types of situations with them. Is that my...
Yeah, that clears it up. What about, like, my daughter is a runner. She likes to take off and run, and then that's always a panic for me. And sometimes she does really good. And then other, like, if it's an off day, you know, she might take off to the grocery store. Or one day we were in the softball park and she decided to take off running, and I had my back turned talking to someone. Normally she's right there by me, but she ended up in the parking lot. That was super scary.
Yeah.
And luckily her uncle was coming into the ballpark and he saw her running towards the parking lot. It was just, thank God it happened. But like, is there role-playing scenarios where you could like address like the running issue? She's super impulsive when it comes to that.
A couple of things that come to mind. I think that I would be intentional with the running and designating a time. Sensing in her, see, I don't know her, so I don't know if her motivation for running is intentional, trying to create panic in you.
Yeah.
Or if she's got a build up where she's just a kid and she's curious and she just needs to run.
Yeah.
So if she's just a kid who's curious and just needs to run, setting up a time with her where we're going to the park. This is run time, I'll race you, and run with her as long as you can, back and forth, so she gets a chance to get those running things out. And she sees that running with you, running with mommy is more fun than running by yourself. You're getting that relationship thing going, trying to transition her into thinking that running with you or running with somebody is safer,
Yeah.
and it's better than running by yourself. If she's doing it to create panic in you, when they turn around and they see you chasing them or trying to catch them, it's game on.
Mm-hmm.
So we're rewarding them. I know we have to, because we have to keep them from running out to a car, but we're rewarding them for behavior that we don't want to see them do. So some of the things that we've done, and with our twins, and this is a individual parent type of situation. We had the animal backpacks that had the harnesses in the front,
Yeah.
the teddy bears on the back, and the handle, not the handle, but I don't want to call it a leash, but a leash on the back, a strap on the back. I don't want to say a leash because people would look at you like, yeah. But
Stereotype parents that have those, and you don't know what that kid could have, issues.
right, and then you hang on to them. The other thing that that worked better for us than the rope. Other thing that we did was had a rope, and it had a knot on the rope for every kiddo that needed to stay together. And so you put your hand on the knot, and everybody walked with their hand on the knot. And if everybody got from the van to the door with nobody letting go of the knot, then we're all going to get to something. And you kid. But make sure that when you're reinforcing, it's something that's sustainable and something you don't mind doing.
Stickers, sticker chart.
For some kids, it's stickers. For my kids, they rolled up the stickers and stuck them up their nose. So the stickers did not work for us.
Lasted about a week for
Stick
us.
them on the card.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. So, but you know your child. So finding something small that they could do, even if it's a couple of M&Ms or if it's a piece of bubble gum or whatever it is for you and them that work, an extra book, or maybe the family will get a book and we'll read the book tonight before we go to bed, whatever that is. That worked with us some, but then when I had so many kids, you would always have some that would hold the knot and that stinker that wouldn't. And if you have said if everybody will hold the knot, well then this stinker runs off and ruins it for the others, and then they're because this person let go of the knot. You can try that. They now have the Velcro tethers
Yeah, I saw that.
with
Where
where it's a bracelet for you and kind of a bungee thing between the child and you. For a kiddo who is creative, it doesn't take them long to figure out. All they have to do is pop that Velcro and they're gone.
she's super intelligent. She would figure that out.
So those are some of the things. And then depending on how serious it is, it may be one of those situations where you don't want to set you and her up for fatal. And that is if you know that she always runs at the ballpark, going to the ballpark for now may not be something we can do. When you can stay with mommy and you don't run, then we can go to a ball game. But if you run at the ball game, we're going to stop, even if we just got there,
Yeah.
and we're going to turn around and we're going to come home because the ballpark's not a safe place for you to be.
We've had to do that where we would go and sit in the car and then when she was ready to say, okay, I'm gonna listen, we can try it again. But yeah, those things we might helps.
I mean, it's not magic, that's for darn sure. But just, you'll find what works and realizing that it's a tool, it's just a tool for you. Perseveration, difficulty in transitioning, practicing with our kiddos, okay? You know, we're going to sit down and you're going to be able to watch your TV show for a little bit, and when this Thomas show is over in 30 minutes, then we're going to go take our bath, practicing the scenarios, giving them specific warnings of how many minutes it is, and be specifics. Adults suck at this. In a little bit, we're going to leave in a minute. Soon you're going to have to stop. What the heck is that to a child? Because is your minute 60 seconds? Or is your minute till you get it done? Or you get it done and you go to look for them and they've entertained themselves and you think, oh, well, they're busy. I'll get one more thing in before I have to do something with them. So be specific and keep your word, even if you have to set a timer for yourself. Offering your kids a substitution. If they're watching Thomas and they don't want to stop and it's bath time and you've given them the warning, bringing their favorite bath toy with you when you go to tell them, here is your Squeaky, here's Squeaky, you carry Squeaky into the bathtub, put him into the water, you know, so that they're substituting what they're doing. And redirection kind of works the same way, where we're not going to be able to do this right now. This is what we can do right now. It's very, very similar.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Ha ha, fool you all, I'm a submarine. Sorry, I just had to burst into a song.
He burst into a song, which was great because I was trying to think what song I was going to burst into. So this works wonderfully. When you have a child who's asking and asking and asking and asking and can't get off of it, when you do something that's totally unexpected and out of the blue that has nothing to do with what they're asking, busting out into a crazy song, first they're looking at you like, what the heck does that have to do with me getting my iPad? But they're having to stop and think about what you're doing, and before long they start looking at you like you're crazy, but you're still laughing, having a good time with it, and the next thing you know, they're not talking about what they were doing, and then you're swooping them up in your enthusiasm and going on to the next thing. Okay? give crazy answers. Are we there that? Are we there that? Are we there that? Did you see that pig fly by here? What? Pigs don't fly. Are you sure? I thought I saw a pig fly through the window. You know, something that taking them off, busting them out, because when they're in this rut, they cannot get out of that rut themselves. They're going to need jump started. Some parents have a huge problem with this concept because it goes back to those circles and this goes back to that control. But when your child feels like that your child is in charge of making certain decisions, the tug of war between the two of you decreases and they become more compliant because they sense they're in control. So what that looks like is, do you want to watch, you know, if they've got a favorite movie that they want to watch or something like that, it's like, do you want to watch Tarzan? Do you want to watch this? You offer them choices of what you approve of and they get to pick. Now you know you're in charge because you're the one who made the selection. But they think they're in charge because they picked. So if you say to them, do you want to take your bath now? Or do you want to take your bath in 10 minutes and then blah, 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 you know, and then they pick. No, I want to watch this for 10 more minutes. Okay, that's fine with me. You can watch this for 10 more minutes. We won't be able to read the story. I'm okay with that. Then they're making that choice, but you've already made it. And some adults just can't wrap their mind around the idea that that's not giving in to a child. They think of it in terms of giving in instead of really making their life a lot easier and teaching the child to how to make decisions. When a child is really, really stuck in subrogation and they can't get out of it, or when they're caught in fight, flight, or freeze, you can't ration with them. You can't use logic with them. They're down here. They're in the brainstem. So if we sit down quietly with them, and it's generally a good idea not to touch them, don't say anything, just kind of right away. And then you think of something that you know they know really well from their past. Do you remember what color Mrs. Fisher's house was when we lived on 5th Street? I was just thinking, do you remember what color her house was? Remember when we lived on 5th Street? I thought it was green, and you might even offer the wrong answer on purpose. And they're like, no, it was blue. Oh, that's right, it was blue. Wait a little bit. Ask him another question about Mrs. Fisher's house. What kind of flowers did she have at back? Were those yellow flowers or red flowers? I can't remember if she had roses or she put daisies back there. Something you know they know the answer to. If you can do that 3 times by waiting in between and asking them a question from their past, it snaps that rut that they're in. And it helps greatly in a meltdown because they're no longer thinking about what it was that made them upset. And it's non-threatening. Because if you're trying to tell a child who's upset, this is not something that you should be upset about, you're at a dead end. They're going to be upset and they're going to feel like you're not valuing their opinions and their feelings and you've invalidated them. But trying to find a technique where we can go back, where they're having to think, because that takes them from being at the bottom of this brainstem to have to think about something that happened in the past, and we're moving them up into higher thinking. Make sense? Okay. All right. Going back to this, core memory versus confabulation. When we want kids to remember things, if they can learn something with more than one sense, using more than one sense. For instance, Jesse is horrible at memorizing facts. When he had to do his multiplication tables, it was a disaster. Our school had what they called the SNAP method, and that literally meant the teacher stood there and she snapped her fingers on a regular basis. Every time she snapped her fingers, the student was supposed to be able to say 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, to the snap. Okay, that's not going to happen with a kid who has poor memory issues or ADHD. But he's really good at music. So when we went online and found the videos that had the kids singing their multiplication tables, him saying it out loud and practicing singing, he retained more of it. And he's not going to be a kid who's going to sit down with a piece of paper and on a blank piece of paper with a bunch of lines and write all those math facts down and remember those. So his teacher let me, and I wasn't doing it with him and he didn't have the computer, but after he practiced singing, I could take his school issue iPad, videotape him singing his multiplication table and send it to his teacher in an email, and that counted for him doing his math facts. Something that they're good at. We find that when kids, anything with a rhythm, chewing on something, and for some reason, and I don't know the answer to why, that when they're chewing on something crunchy or something sour while they're doing their homework, stimulates parts of their brains and their sensories that the things that they're reading stick. So pairing it with something else, the more senses that you can get when you're trying to get them to do something and remember, the better. The use of pictures helps with core memory and confabulation. Even in high school students, our 16-year-old had an etymology class where we had these words, and the words aren't related to anything. They just go through so many words and so many words, and so there's not a theme going. And you had to learn what the word was, what it meant, and how to spell it. And so his therapist would say the word to him, and she would say, "What's the first picture pops in your mind when you hear that word?" And it didn't have to make sense. It didn't have to represent what the word was. But he drew a picture of that on one side and wrote the word on the other. And so then, as he studied those words, he remembered the picture in his head. Oh yeah, that's. Oh yeah, that's. But he wouldn't have got it from just looking at the word. We limit the items that we expect them to know. Kid, instead of having 25 spelling words, maybe he has 15. Maybe he has 10 spelling words. Something that he can remember. We allow the children to relate the information in their strengths, like Jesse's singing. If it's true or false versus multiple choice, or if it's talking through their answers versus handwriting it out into paragraphs. The use of lists are good with these kids. Routines. If you can take a picture of your child doing what you want them to do step by step and put it in their room. Cleaning the rooms is a perfect example because it's one of the things that parents always talk about. While they did clean their room and blah, blah, blah. Well, do they understand what you mean by clean the room, number one? Have you thoroughly explained, and are they going to remember? So if they have on their wall a picture of them folding their clothes, putting their clothes in their drawer, picking up their trash, putting their trash in their trash container, the things that you want to see that mean a clean room, then all they have to do is look. This is what I expect. This is what this looks like when your room is clean. And for us, being able to know when we look at a child who has issues with core memory and confabulation, when I say confabulation, it does not have the same tone if I said, "You lied to me." You lied to me implies a value. It's a judgment. And kids take that judgment into who they see themselves to be. We have to be careful when we're talking to our kiddos because we want to talk into their life what we expect to see them grow into. If we've got a kiddo who has trouble telling the truth and we're in a situation with them, rather than talk about the struggles they have telling the truth, if we talk into their life and we say, someday you are going to be the best storyteller there is. Or you're going to get the award for being the most honest person in class versus you're a liar. Because if you're talking to your kids, you lied to me, you're a liar, they've already achieved what you expect for them to do. They've already arrived. strategies, and then we're gonna get up and walk around. So for us, we wanna make sure that when we're with our kiddos, that we remain calm. Because if we're not self-regulated and we've not dealt with our own stuff, we're not gonna be able to deal with these kiddos. They're gonna hit our triggers. We're gonna bring some emotion to the situation that doesn't need to be there. We need to look at the child's unusual behavior and find the logic behind the behavior. So there was a mom who shared that her daughter had a favorite snuggly and went to bed with her favorite snuggly. And through the course of staying at somebody's house and moving to somebody else's house and this and that, they lost a snuggly. And the little girl was hysterical every time she went to bed at night. Mom was a little perturbed because now she's not going to bed, she's screaming, it's just a stuffed animal, here, take your dolly, here, take your dog, here, take your whatever, no. And so she was upset about this. When we step back and look at her unusual behavior of not being able to go to bed without that particular snuggly, and Mom can look at, this was the snuggly that went with her through Mom going to jail, Mom getting out of jail, Mom going into recovery, you know, the intensive part of the detox, Mom coming out, then staying with so-and-so until Mom could get on her feet. That snuggly wasn't just a stuffed animal to that kiddo. So she's acting out, and it looks like she's being unwilling because of this behavior or to go to bed, but this child, that was that child's security blanket. So we need to stop and think, why? What is driving this child's behavior before we determine that it needs to be fixed? We need to develop a strategy that matches that behavior. So grounding is so nebulous and is usually not effective. So we wanted to start to think in terms of logic and natural consequences. So if the rule is that your bike needs to be put in the garage every day when you get done riding your bike, and Johnny doesn't put his bike up, you know, the logical consequence is that Johnny loses his bike for a period of time, whether that's a day or 2 days. If you've got a kid who really has trouble with memory and hyperactivity, losing the bike for a week may be extreme. A day may be enough for them to lose their bike. A natural consequence would be you didn't see his bike and you ran over with the car. But going out and telling him you're grounded doesn't address the issue of what you're trying to teach him. So when our kids are involved in behaviors that we would like to see improvement in, if we look at it as a teachable moment, showing them what we would rather have them do, rather than feeling the need to punish them because they didn't meet our expectations, we're going to see a greater change much, much quicker. Not everything that a child does requires a consequence. We are an environment where we feel like we need to control these kids because they reflect on us how well we're doing as parents, and so we consequence them. But if we're not looking behind the behavior and we're not putting everything into context, when we consequence their behavior, if we've not looked at the need, it's going to escalate. You're going to give them a consequence. They're going to have a reaction to your consequence. Then you're mad because now not only did they lose their phone for a week, but now you're calling me a bitch, and now this is going to happen, and then it just goes. And if you're consequencing every time they don't meet your expectation, there's no end to that. And the real truth is you can never out-consequence a behavior. So we need to be doing the mind switch to thinking about teachable moments rather than punishments. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that one thing that I always try to keep in mind, and you can do this as a parent or educator too, but just always keep making sure their dignity was still intact. You know, after I, whatever
Had to correct you.
behavior was or whatever. And then the consequence, I always tried, and my mom actually taught me this, to never institute something I couldn't manage. So if I say, you know, you're going to be grounded for 2 weeks,
Who's
I
punished?
you know, yeah. So, and I did that, you know, as a teacher too, a lot of times, because, you know, sometimes in the moment you're going to fling out something that's going to be extreme, and then you're like, and then if you can't carry it out, then they're going to think, well, I got her, you know, so next time, whatever. So those are things that seem to be helpful. And as a parent too, I mean, it's.
And Susan, you know, again, remember, I don't have kids, I've got pets, so it's easy for me to look in from the outside. But I mean, part of what I hear you describing here is just perhaps a more effective way of doing parenting regardless.
Yes.
But what I've heard you say before is the sense of urgency or the relevance to the topic of fetal alcohol syndrome and other issues is there may actually be some capability issues or some disabilities that are impeding the child from being able to act as we would expect them as a kid. So some of it's just getting better results out of children through different strategies, and some of it is these are strategies that actually are going to help teach them some different, maybe train their brain differently or get, is that
Yes.
fair?
Yes, it's very
Okay,
fair.
'cause this
Thank
is,
you.
I mean, parenting 101, but it becomes
Yes.
much more critical in a situation where you've got
Kids who have
kids
challenges.
who have challenges. Thank you.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Tanya, for summarizing that. Being consistent. When I'm in Walmart and across the aisle, I hear this mom, if you do that again, if you do that again, if you do that again. And I'm like, I want to smack the mama. It's like, be consistent and stick to your word, because if they get away with it 1 out of 4 times, they are excellent gamblers. It is worth it to them to try it, because this might be the day and this might be the time that they do get away with it. The 4 S's: simplicity, specific, structure, and supervision. Keep things simple with your kids. Use specific language.
Kiss.
Make sure, make sure that there's plenty of structure, because my kiddos, I'll tell you, the recipe for disaster. If I'm busy, got my conference call, I got some work to do, and I say to them, go find something to do. Because I don't have time to set up 15-minute activities back to back to back to back to back to keep them busy, and I've got to get this done. I guarantee you, I'm going to have all kinds of trauma, because they'll go find something to do, but that's because they're not being directed and there's not that structure. And we have to offer these kids supervision, and not just regular supervision, but tons of supervision. These are the kind of kiddos that my 11-year-old, who's Jessie, who's extremely impulsive and does not connect consequences in actions. We have a fenced backyard that's got a 4-foot fence on it. If I'm not in the fence with him, he's going to, and has in the past, jumped over the fence to the neighbor's yard, gone into a shed to see what kind of cool things are in a shed. Now, Jesse's not thinking, I'm trespassing, I'm breaking and entering. I could be arrested if I were 16 or 25 and doing the same thing. He's thinking, I want to see what's in Chuck's shed. There's got to be something cool in there. And when he finds something cool in Chuck's shed, like he found a handy-dandy, brand new shiny box cutter, that came home with him. So, it's on me even more, because now he can't be outside unless an adult's with him. And this kind of goes with your daughter, is that we want to think that, and things that, well, by now they should be, and we should be able, and when we're doing that, we're on the wrong thought process. Because if we're not comfortable that we can maintain their safety and see what happens, then maybe that's not something we can do. And so he's spending some time in the house. You need to be able to find the humor in what's happening. When we are rebuilding relationships with kids who have challenges, it's tough. It is really hard work. And it's daunting because it's 24/7, day after day after day. And sometimes we lose our sense of humor. And when we lose our sense of humor, we lose our joy in being in relationship with them, and they become another job. They sense that, we sense that. And so if we can maintain our sense of humor, and if we can do that paradigm shift from adapting and helping them adapt to fixing them, we're going to be way ahead of the curve. Because we can't. We can help strategies, we can help them learn, we can try to teach them what they need to, and teach ourselves what we need to, but we need to learn to parent the kids that we have instead of trying to parent the kids we have into the kid that we wanted. So, let's get up, move around, walk around, get a drink, do what you need to do. We're going to practice a little bit and then finish up with parenting from your strengths. Section that we're going to talk about is parenting from your strengths. And so you can pick up any self-help book, you can go to any therapist, you can go to whatever, and they can map out a plan for you. But if it doesn't work with the way your home is set up, and it doesn't work with your particular personality style, then it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to feel defeated. So you look at parenting from your strengths, what works best for you. You look at the child's unusual behavior, find the logic behind it. So we're going that way. We're developing a strategy that, what is this? This is not right.
Yeah, that's what it says on
Yep, this is not right. Okay.
It's the same as the other one.
Yep, silly. These things are duplicated. So we'll go through these real quick and we'll fly by the Europeans using our adaptability. So again, what is our strengths? What is hardest for us to do? If we are a parent that is not very well organized and doesn't do details, forming some big, huge behavior plan where we're keeping track of, if you do this, you get this many points and this many points and this many points. At the end of the day, you get this many points you're going to trade, and you've got to keep track of all that. That's not going to be a plan that's going to work for your home. So finding something that works for you, building on that. If you are somebody who enjoys reading, you'll find ways to work in lessons from things that you read. I think what we're trying to get at with parenting from your strengths is not trying to force you to feel inferior when you are trying to implement strategies with your kids.
A real quick strategy that you just mentioned about reading, and parents can do this as well, is that I used a lot of picture books, read-alouds, even for 4th and 5th grade, that would give a message. So every week I did a read-aloud that would have a message for the week, that would teach something. You know, like you were talking about even your daughter, there's a plethora, there's a lot of different children's books that have wonderful messages that could teach these very things.
And we can talk about if you're doodling, coloring, modeling, cooking, whatever you feel comfortable in your element to do. There's plenty of opportunities to interact with that child while you're cooking, while you're doing that, teaching them as you go. This is a worksheet for you to think about what are your strengths and what you bring to your parenting experience. The last thing we want to talk about is self-care tools. And I've been to so many trainings as a foster parent, where they kept talking about self-care, and it really was a struggle for me to stay engaged in those conversations, because I didn't have time for self-care. You're like, find something that you enjoy doing, and it doesn't have to cost any money. And because it's like, well, I didn't have money to pay a sitter. I had to be responsible for my kids. I had a house full of kids, and I don't have people lined up at my door that says, hey, let me take care of your 8 kids while you go do self-care.
Yeah.
And then the things that I did like, simple things that didn't cost any money, taking a hot bath. In my house, the bathroom can be open indefinitely. And as soon as I go to the bathroom to shut the door, everybody in the whole house, and you're like, oh my gosh, or you're taking a bath and it's like, there it goes.
Yeah.
Peaceful feeling, good gone.
My little one
Goodbye.
likes to say, I'm gonna get it too.
So, but I have learned through the course of time and not doing self-care, that if we tend to, as caregivers, get adjusted to the level of dysfunction that surrounds us, to where that becomes our new normal. And so we don't realize, it's like the frog in the hot water, we don't really realize how much we need self-care until something happens that shows us that we need self-care.
Which, when you're in the depths of the disease of addiction, and you're, in my case, my son, we were getting as sick as he was, because we weren't taking care of ourselves. And then it got to a point where we couldn't even figure out how to take care of ourselves. And by that point, we were in a crisis. And it wasn't until we reached out, to Kim and other people that we started to kind of understand that we weren't taking care of ourselves.
I think the best illustration that makes the most sense is if you've ever flown the airplane and the stewardess says, and the oxygen mask will drop down, put your mask on first and then put the mask on the child. And at first, the first time I heard it, I'm like, but then when you start thinking about it, if you don't have oxygen, you can't help keep your child safe. When we look at self-care in the same way, then it makes sense. If we're not taking care of us, we can't take care of them. We're not going to recognize we're in dangerous territory. We're not going to recognize that we ourselves. I've been in counseling for the last 6 months for post-traumatic stress, from taking care of kids who have layers and layers of dysfunction. And it came to a crux when coming up on a year ago on Labor Day, we found out that our oldest son at home had sexually molested our daughter. And so all that comes with that. I didn't protect her. I was offering supervision. I was watching. I was, and then having to walk through those systems of protecting one child, loving and wanting to protect the other child, and knowing that you had to protect the one that needed the most protection, which meant drawing
her and validate it.
Which meant drawing really, really clear boundary lines. Now our son is in residential treatment, and he's done exceptionally well in residential treatment, but he can't come home. Coming home is not an option. And when you feel
Probably horrible.
Right, and so then the protection, and then the child doesn't understand, even no matter how old they are, because I had to send I left my kid that place, because it was gonna get me in a lot more trouble if I let him come home. And so, and he didn't understand why he had to stay. They couldn't come home, and it's like,
It's not that you don't love them any less.
right, it's like you can't explain it. And so like even today while he's in prison and I'm trying to talk, and explain stuff that, reiterate stuff from way back when that I've always said. Some days he seems like he's understanding and getting it, but he's still,
To be disconnected.
It is a big.
There's so much collateral damage that can come with addiction. And some of it you don't even know. I mean, like our daughter suffered abuse from her son in different ways, not sexually, but, and we weren't even aware of it. And so she's like PSTB, or PSAT because of that. And then you feel guilty, and then you draw your boundaries. Like when he came out of jail, he could not come home.
Right.
And so then you feel.
And people in the community that don't understand what's involved. Yes. You must love your son.
Right.
So
Even your family member, like I had something when I put my son out of my house, and they were like, "Oh, why you put him out?" And I was like, "You can take him home with you." See what happens. But then when you look at their own life, you have to also remember who is talking and what's going on. Because I had some family, and I was like, if your son was at my house, he'd be dead, but he definitely would be locked up. You know what I'm saying?
Tom, you're gonna have something.
Yeah, I guess real quickly, I want to echo something, Susan, that you said at the beginning. First of all, thank you for sharing that part of your story.
Right.
In this context, because I think we've all taken risks and been vulnerable and shared stuff to show that, while we're making progress, it's not perfection. So thank you for opening up and talking about that. And the thing that struck me earlier when you were talking about that is something we talk about around our church and our community center is that the more we talk about this sort of stuff, it's uncomfortable, but we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because when we talk about it, it reduces the shame. It makes it okay for other people to bring up and say, "Oh wow, I've experienced something similar. I'm not alone." It reduces the stigma.
Right.
And if you've heard of a woman named Brene Brown, Brene B-R-E-N-E Brown, find her on YouTube. She does a lot of TED Talks around vulnerability and shame. She dubs herself the queen of shame because she really talks about how important it is to be vulnerable so that we can then remove and reduce the stigma and the shame. And so thank you, and thank you everyone for your.
What I found too is, in connection with what you're saying, is when I try to always be professional, as an educator. Because you do have to have a level of trust of who you can trust with your information,
Right.
But when there are those moments that I've opened, it's allowed another person to open their life and not feel so ashamed and so alone. I mean, it's
right. So there's your self-care plan. Things you need to think of what's going to work for you in your life to put you in the best spot. And then last words for the journey. Parenting is a process, not an event, which speaks to what Todd was talking about. It's ongoing. Relationships are time-consuming, and trust is built. Mistakes are opportunities, and fear is your enemy. Fear of the unknown, and fear that you're going to make the wrong choice, fear that people are criticizing you, fear that people are going to judge you. Fear is your enemy. And here are some resources for you that you can reach out for information. I have a nonprofit, which is essentially in a NOFAS, which is on there. For fetal optic spectrum disorders, we have some resources on our sites. And if I can help you in any way, looking for information for kids who have neurological deficits and challenges, I'd be more than happy to do that for you. And there's a list of books for you if you guys are readers. Again, this is who we are. There's the little bio that you don't have to read, but it's in there if you'd like to.